Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes. As his lawyers argue, the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case, no.
She did, and when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now. That will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So,
You said you know he's innocent.
1,000%.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's Black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a Black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower of the prosecution is so strong, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95. That it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
This is going to be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks?
For sure, weeks.
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
He knows the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is an Epstein redux or something.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges, but prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged a judge to remand him.
Christian Combs, the eldest son of Sean Diddy Combs, has reportedly entered confidential cooperation talks with federal prosecutors in New York ahead of a high-profile trial scheduled for Monday. The trial involves serious charges against his father, including sex trafficking and racketeering, according to 2 law enforcement officials briefed on the investigation. Federal court records reviewed on Friday indicate that prosecutors recently filed a sealed memorandum outlining anticipated testimony from a cooperating family member. A phrase defense attorneys confirmed refers to the 27-year-old recording artist, also known as King Combs. Prosecutors allege that Christian Combs possesses first-hand knowledge of private flights, guest lists, and cash transactions connected to gatherings hosted by his father in the Hamptons and Miami between 2015 and 2022. That period overlaps with the time frame detailed in last fall's federal indictment describing a sex trafficking network. This cooperation could be a game changer, said former Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Diaz, noting that testimony from a close family member is rare and often highly persuasive in conspiracy trials. Sean Combs reportedly rejected a plea deal last week that would have limited any prison term to 12 years. His legal team has pledged to fight the charges vigorously. The sealed filing, first entered on Tuesday, does not confirm whether Christian Combs has signed a formal non-prosecution agreement. However, sources familiar with the matter say discussions intensified following March raids by Homeland Security at Diddy's estates in Los Angeles and Miami, where agents seized phones, laptops, and financial ledgers. Investigation summaries shared with the defense this week indicate that at least 14 electronic devices contain communications between father and son. Prosecutors are expected to seek live testimony to authenticate those exchanges. Legal analysts say that if convicted on all counts, Sean Combs could face more than 20 years in prison. By contrast, Christian Combs, who has not been charged, may be seeking to shield himself from any conspiracy liability by cooperating now. Any family member who witnessed questionable financial activity was potentially at risk once those devices were seized, said Esef Roberts, a former DEA agent and defense consultant familiar with sex trafficking cases. Encrypted app messages reportedly show Christian Combs arranging charter flights that transported high-profile guests to invitation-only white parties in the Hamptons and late-night events aboard yachts in Biscayne Bay. Prosecutors claim those flights, allegedly funded through shell companies linked to Bad Boy Entertainment, support their argument that Sean Combs used employees to facilitate illegal interstate activity. Defense attorneys strongly dispute this, insisting the charters were for legitimate promotional events. In a motion filed Thursday, lead attorney Aaron Sussman accused prosecutors of weaponizing family dynamics, calling the pressure on Christian Combs a new low in celebrity prosecutions. Sussman also asked Judge Aaron Subramanian to review the sealed proffer privately before opening statements. The judge, however, deferred, saying he would rule after voir dire. Representatives for Christian Combs declined to comment due to ongoing legal proceedings. However, a source close to the artist confirmed he met twice with prosecutors in early April, each time with independent legal counsel present. That timeline appears to coincide with key developments in the case against Sean Combs. Attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs have publicly criticized federal prosecutors for allegedly withholding key information, including interviews with critical insiders. This development comes as Christian Combs' potential testimony looms large, increasing pressure on celebrities once closely tied to Diddy's business empire. Last week, rapper 50 Cent hinted on social media that he possesses court documents, listing high-profile individuals who profited from ventures backed by Combs. According to sources close to the investigation, prosecutors have already subpoenaed records involving guest appearances, endorsement deals, and revenue-sharing agreements. Although no additional family members have been confirmed as cooperating, insiders say prosecutors have approached Justin, Combs, and Quincy Brown for voluntary interviews. Reaction within the Black entertainment community has been mixed. Some industry veterans sympathize with Christian Combs, who faces a conflict between familial loyalty and legal responsibility. Others argue he has a moral duty to disclose the truth. The culture can't demand transparency and then shame the first relative who steps forward, said Danielle Harper, a music journalist who has covered bad boy entertainment since the 1990s. Sean Combs' influence has long been undeniable. From 1994 through the pandemic, his annual summer parties attracted stars like Mary J. Blige, Usher, Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and others from the worlds of sports, film, and tech. Prosecutors now allege these gatherings also functioned as recruitment. Events for a sex trafficking network claims the defense dismisses as sensational fiction. Legal analysts note that testimony from a close family member can help weave financial records and witness accounts into a compelling story. Paper trails show money, but relatives show motive, said Grace Harris, a professor at Loyola Law School who studies celebrity criminal cases. She added that jurors often place heavy weight on credibility, particularly when family members testify against each other, a dynamic seen in the 2019 federal conviction of associates tied to rapper Tekashi 6ix 99. According to a sealed memorandum, Christian Combs is expected to testify on 6 key topics: private jet manifests, payment orders. From Combs-linked companies, real-time communication tools used during events, security procedures for guest screening, post-party cash distributions, instructions received after media inquiries. Defense lawyers plan to challenge each point, claiming Christian had limited decision-making authority and no direct knowledge of illegal activity. Beyond legal strategy, the case also highlights a generational divide within the Combs family. In social media posts last winter, Christian distanced himself from Bad Boy Entertainment's finances, saying his focus was on music and fashion. Friends say the federal raids in March rattled him, especially video footage showing tactical agents storming the Los Angeles home where he frequently recorded. The plea deal Sean Combs rejected would have required him to plead guilty to 1 count of racketeering and 1 count related to sex trafficking. It also included surrendering firearms seized during the March raids and paying a $20 million forfeiture. Defense attorney Aaron Sussman called the proposed sentence excessive, stating, "No settlement that labels our client a conspirator is acceptable." Jury selection begins Monday and is expected to draw heavy media attention, with courtroom seats assigned via lottery. Prosecutors are likely to open with claims that Combs orchestrated a multi-layered enterprise blending music, liquor marketing, and luxury entertainment to conceal criminal acts. The defense, in turn, is expected to argue that the case hinges on consensual relationships and financially motivated witnesses. If Judge Aaron Subramanian allows Christian Combs to testify, the Yaoziad trial schedule could shift quickly. Prosecutors have indicated they may call him during the first week, before other cooperating witnesses whose identities remain under seal. Front-loading a family witness is a tactical bet, said former U.S. Attorney Mark Diaz. It anchors the narrative early. Industry analysts warn the trial could ripple across hip-hop and luxury branding. Several liquor distributors have already paused orders for De Leon tequila, while streaming services report surges in plays of Bad Boys. Back catalog as fans revisit the label's cultural impact. Outside the courtroom, activists stress the broader implications of the moment. Families often carry the hidden weight of abuse, said Monique Reed, director of the Black Women's Justice Collective. If this testimony helps survivors be heard, it matters beyond one courtroom. As of Friday, Christian Combs had not submitted a formal witness affidavit, and defense attorneys retain the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment should prosecutors question him about potentially self-incriminating acts. A sealed court docket indicates a status conference is scheduled for 8 a.m. Monday, just 30 minutes before jury assembly is set to begin. Sean Diddy Combs remains held without bail at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center after Judge Arun Subramanian ruled in March that newly surfaced allegations and the seizure of firearms justified pretrial detention. Combs' legal team has since filed a renewed bail application, citing family health concerns, but prosecutors oppose release, calling him a flight risk with extensive global resources. Christian Combs continues to promote his upcoming EP on social media, though his touring schedule has been suspended, according to a statement from CYN Music Group. The label added it respects all legal processes, but declined further comment. Monday's proceedings are expected to open with the court's ruling on whether Christian Combs' cooperation agreement is admissible. Jury selection for one of the most closely watched celebrity trials of the decade will follow. Late Friday, prosecutors filed ledgers documenting that Sean Combs moved over $74 million through 17 shell companies between 2016 and 2023. The ledgers, attached to an evidentiary motion, detail wire transfers originating from core Bad Boy Entertainment accounts and routed through limited liability firms registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the British Virgin Islands. Prosecutors allege these entities funded chartered Gulfstream flights, luxury estate rentals, and private security teams tied to what court filings call high-risk gatherings. Forensic accountant Lydia Marcato, retained by prosecutors, noted that identical five-figure withdrawals often occurred within hours of private events later referenced in affidavits. Two invoices list Christian Combs as the internal approver for catering and yacht expenses, records that intersect with his reported cooperation outlined in a sealed memorandum Thursday. Defense attorney Aaron Sussman dismissed the ledgers as ordinary entertainment expenses, accusing prosecutors of rebranding standard hospitality as criminal conduct, in a letter to Judge Subramanian. The ledger release coincided with a second pretrial development. Federal agents executed a supplemental warrant at J.P. Morgan Chase on Wednesday, seizing bank statements related to De Leon Tequila marketing funds. One flagged transaction, a $900,000 wire transfer in July 2021, allegedly flowed from a Spirit subsidiary to a dormant media firm linked to Combs' longtime advisor, and then to a private charter broker. The following day, a Gulfstream jet carried 8 unidentified passengers from Teterboro, New Jersey, to Nassau, Bahamas, for the now infamous White Sands weekend, cited elsewhere in the indictment. As scrutiny grows, sponsors and collaborators began reassessing exposure. Revolt TV stated it had no operational overlap with the implicated shell firms and would cooperate if subpoenaed. Diageo, parent company of Ciroc and De Leon, said it concluded an internal review and maintains no current financial relationship. With Combs, brand analysts warn the fallout could erode long-standing goodwill built during Combs' 2-decade influence on luxury branding. The ledgers also showed $6.4 million in charitable disbursements, including $450,000 to Howard University and $300,000 to a Los Angeles youth arts nonprofit. Prosecutors contend some donations were backfilled with matching personal withdrawals, what former IRS criminal investigator John Mendez, unaffiliated with the case, described as circular financing. Charity becomes a liquidity valve when banks start asking questions, Mendes explained. Separate from the financial evidence, prosecutors submitted a witness list that includes 3 former aviation staffers tied to Combs' fleet. One mechanic is expected to testify that passenger manifests were scrubbed from maintenance logs to evade audits, an act allegedly justified by Combs' aviation manager as VIP privacy. The defense called the practice irrelevant hygiene and filed a motion to exclude it as prejudicial. Judge Subramanian scheduled an unusual Sunday hearing to address the dispute, underscoring the compressed trial timeline. The disclosures reignited debate across the music industry over whether former Bad Boy artists should speak publicly. A representative for Mary J. Blige declined comment on reports that she may be subpoenaed. Usher's team said he had not been contacted by either party. Rapper 50 Cent escalated his ongoing campaign against Combs by posting a screenshot of the unsealed ledger, captioning it, "I tried to warn y'all." Columbia University sociology professor Marceliana Morgan said the online response reflects a generational reckoning over accountability on platforms like Black Twitter. Hashtags such as Protect King Combs and Black Wall of Silence trended simultaneously, illustrating the tension between those supporting Christian's potential testimony and those fearing a federal effort to dismantle Black-owned enterprises. "The distrust runs deep," said cultural commentator Michael Harriot. "When the feds parade ledgers, some see truth, others see Tuskegee all over again." On Capitol Hill, Representative Ayanna Pressley, DMA, urged the Justice Department to release anonymized data on charging disparities in high-profile sex trafficking investigations. Pressley warned that public attention on celebrity cases should not eclipse needed systemic reform. The DOJ declined to comment. Inside Combs Enterprises, senior staff held an emergency board call Friday. Sources say COO TK Brooks advised colleagues that contingency plans include selling minority stakes in the Sean John Fashion Archive and pausing a planned Miami hospitality project. Employees reportedly received notices warning of potential furloughs if legal exposure continues to escalate. Jury selection preparations are underway. Judge Subramanian distributed a 24-page questionnaire probing potential jurors' familiarity with Combs's music, views on federal conspiracy charges, and connections. To any of the 162 prospective witnesses, jury selection is expected to last 3 days, with opening statements possibly beginning Thursday, if a panel is seated without significant delays. The defense continues to argue that prosecutors are criminalizing consensual adult nightlife. Sussman intends to call expert sociologist Katrina Bell, who will testify that celebrity parties often involve confidentiality agreements, but are not inherently illicit. Prosecutors plan to counter with digital forensics specialist Omar Velasquez, who says encrypted chats among event planners and metadata from seized phones show deliberate guest pairings and off-site gatherings aligned with alleged sex trafficking. Meanwhile, Sotheby's confirmed it will postpone the planned July auction of Combs's contemporary art collection, citing potential federal forfeiture claims. Executives at Warner Music Group convened a risk committee to evaluate whether streaming revenue flowing through Combs-controlled publishing accounts may be subject to seizure. At a separate press event, National Urban League President Mark Morial urged the public to separate due process from moral judgment, but acknowledged that the trial risks eclipsing Combs's philanthropic history. Howard University declined to comment on whether it would return donations if funds are proven to be tainted, stating only that it is monitoring developments. On Friday evening, prosecutors filed a Rule 404B notice indicating they may introduce prior bad acts, specifically a 2013 Miami incident in which 2 former bodyguards claimed they were ordered to confiscate guests' phones and delete footage. The defense called it an attempt to bias the jury with unrelated allegations. Legal analyst Rebecca Roy noted that such evidence often survives admissibility challenges if tied to motive or method. Security at the courthouse has intensified, with additional screening checkpoints and a media overflow room designated. Officials anticipate crowds similar to the 2021 Ghislaine Maxwell trial, though pandemic-era limits on public gallery access remain in effect. As the weekend concluded, Combs's legal team filed a motion seeking a protective order over sensitive family communications, while prosecutors counterfiled for expedited disclosure of expert reports. A final status conference is set for 9 a.m. Monday to settle outstanding motions and finalize witness sequencing. Christian Combs's cooperation status remains sealed, but multiple sources expect prosecutors to call him during the first week of the trial. If he testifies, he could authenticate key documents, flight records, and encrypted messages, potentially accelerating the government's case. Sussman has pledged an aggressive cross-examination strategy that may probe the younger Combs' motives and underscore his lack of criminal charges. For now, the unsealed ledgers offer the most detailed look yet at the financial architecture prosecutors say blurred the lines between entertainment and criminal conduct. The trial, already framed as a watershed moment for celebrity accountability, will open under the shadow of family testimony, layered finance, and an empire on the brink.